மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
We are going to start this chapter off by looking at the two knights defense, which white has two ways of reaching, either by playing knight c3, d5, knight f3, or playing the immediate knight f3, d5, knight c3, both of which, of course, lead to the same position. Now, as I already mentioned in the introduction, there are 2.5 options that I'm recommending here. First of all, if you play the Caro variation, as I mentioned in the intro, you can exchange an e4 and play knight f6 with the idea that after the exchange here, you will have the same pawn structure that we saw in that chapter, and the plans would be also the same. So this could be a way to avoid some study time and have a system in your back pocket if you already play the Caro. But otherwise, we will look at two options of bishop g4 and knight f6. Now, I've played both of these moves over the years, and the first move that I'd like to look at is bishop to g4. This is traditionally considered the more standard option for black here. And the whole point here is that, well, of course, we develop the bishop, we pin the knight, and we want to play e6 without locking the bishop behind the pawn chain. Now, in this position, white's most popular and only critical try is the move h3. Quite rare, but a move that I face is e takes d5. Now, this move is quite popular amongst club players who are just trying to get a normal game, not really sure what to do with the opening. But this is not really a good move for white, because after cd, black gets easy development, and white has just traded off one of his central pawns. So that's nothing to worry about or require any special knowledge. h3 is the main line here, against which I'm recommending the standard bishop takes f3, queen f3, and now e6. And although we have given up our bishop quite early in the game, in turn we have constructed this sort of light square triangle with our pawns, and these pawns will play the role of our light square bishop. So again, we don't really mind giving away our light square bishop because we get very, very solid position on the light squares, and in general all our pieces can easily access good squares. However, the plan that I like to recommend here is a little unusual, and hopefully it looks very aesthetic, and hopefully will catch your opponents by surprise and give you a good game. Now, white's most popular option here is the move d3. And generally, the character of play here remains very similar no matter what white does. White sort of goes for the slow game, where he's going to try to exploit the advantage of his two bishops in the long term, and perhaps some additional central space. So d3 is the most popular move. I've also faced g3 on several occasions here. Most of the time, these moves transpose as the bishop would like to go to g2. The only other move before we move on to the main line that I'd like to mention is d4. And this is a more ambitious try for white. He wants to put his pawns all the way to the center. And there's a couple ways to meet this move, but nowadays it's quite popular to play pawn takes e4 with an indirect hit on the pawn on d4. White plays queen e4. So now we get to, we can see the center but gain some extra time against the queen. Two options here. If queen h4, then after the obvious bishop e7, and then the solid knight d7. Again, black's position is very solid. The queen on h4 may become a little bit of a target. So white has been preferring the move queen to d3. And now a quirky maneuver for black here is knight to a6, aiming to hit white with some knight b4 idea. So if white isn't careful, playing like bishop e2, knight b4, queen d1, got to stay intact with c2 and d4. Black can win some material here with queen takes d4. So knight a6 aims to sort of disturb white's development. White usually plays a3, and now queen a5, which is a nice move here, threatening the potential ideas of knight b4 again because of the pin on the a file. And also, in a game between two grandmasters, what happened, white played this quirky rook b1, trying to support b4. Black retreated with knight c7, going to d5. And then after b4, played the amusing queen f5. And in the resulting endgame, black was able to win. So that's a quick word on d4. But again, the main focus here, as I mentioned, is on moves like d3 and g3. And against move d3 or g3, I recommend, as I mentioned, a rare setup involving the move g6. So this is quite an impression here, putting all these pawns on light squares. But the idea here is that we trade away our light square bishop, so we're going to put the pawns on the light squares in order to control that color complex. Meanwhile, this bishop in g7 is going to have a wonderful role in the g7 square, where it's going to patrol all the dark squares and, of course, the long diagonal. So this idea works really well, I believe, here, and has been tested by some grandmasters. As an example of how we're going to proceed here, for example, white goes g3, we would go bishop to g7. White can play like bishop to g2. Now we're going to go knight e7, castles, castles, we have transposed into a game by two very strong grandmasters. Playing black was Shakhyar Mamediyarov, who's a 27-50 grandmaster. His game went bishop g5. He played knight d7. So nice little hedgehog kind of formation, if you're familiar with that opening, where black is sort of putting all his pieces behind his pawns and is ready to strike at a later moment here. White played rook to e1, and black decided this was the moment to sort of lurch forward with d4, knight b1, h6 was played. Now after bishop c1, white was retreating, and now black played c5. And later on prevailed after further rook c8 and b5 and c4. And again, this is sort of the plan of this position. First, we're trying to be really solid with the slice square setup. Bishop goes to g7, very strong there. Knight e7, knight to d7, and then look for plans and look for our chances. Almost always this will involve some queenside play, since our bishop is pointing that way, and our pawns can be quite mobile up the board here. So I believe this is a quick and easy to learn idea against the two knights. You can just play this very solid bishop g4, h3, trade, e6, and then follow with the g6. Bishop goes to g7, knights come out e7, d7, no bad pieces, very solid, and queenside ambitions. So this is my quick suggestion with bishop g4. Now, another move that I can recommend here is the move knight to f6, which is a move that I've been playing in recent years. And the idea here is to get a more complicated game than the solid nature of bishop g4. I use both depending on the opponent and the circumstances, so perhaps this is an option that you could also use. Now, again, in this position, the immediate idea is to put pressure on the e4 pawn, and the only critical option for white here is really to play e5. Once a master opponent played e takes d5 against me here, but this move is not any good, as I've explained already. After c takes d5, play for black is very simple. This is a move that I've actually faced quite a bit in online play against some weaker opponents, or opponents who are just trying to get a normal game here. But again, no trouble at all for black. You can simply go moves like bishop g4 or knight c6, a combo of them. For example, something like this would be a dream for black. Get the rook to the half-open file, develop the bishop normally, and then proceed. Depending on what white does, you can try to chase some queenside play or some central play. Again, completely normal game for black. I think black is already a little bit better here. So really nothing too troubling here except the move e5. Now the main idea for white, for black here is knight e4. Push that knight forward into white's position, make him uncomfortable. Of course, if white takes, pawn takes, again, the knight on f3 is getting pushed around, and furthermore, after something like knight g5, white has to contend with moves like queen d5, putting pressure on the e5 pawn, or the simple bishop f5, and then h6 is a threat. So generally, white does not do that. And the most challenging move here, the most important move to know, is knight to e2, which we'll have a look at shortly. As for alternatives, I faced d3 and I faced moves like d4, neither of which is any troubling. For example, after d3, knight c3, pawn c3, I've played c5, and the resulting position looks like a French winnower, where black goes bishop e4 and bishop takes c3, except in this case we have given white doubled pawns without giving up our bishop pair, or our dark square bishop here. So black just wants to continue normally with knight c6, bring the bishop potentially to g4, then play e6. The queen will, of course, go to a5, just like in the French, putting good pressure on white's weak pawns. So this is a very easy to handle position here that can be played without too many worries or prep. Same goes for d4. Here I just like takes, and then the move c5. Again, it's like a French winnower, where I've kept not only is my dark square bishop on the board, but I also have the option of potentially developing this bishop outside the pawn chain. Again, black's immediate plan can involve moves like queen a5, knight c6, of course e6. Sometimes, and most times, it's actually okay to keep the bishop on c8 locked in. And again, this is very easy to play, simple position for black. So the only move to worry about here is the move knight to e2, which aims to embarrass our knight with d3 and trap it. So we're forced to play queen b6, going for a mate in one potentially. White plays d4, and now e6. So this is a critical position in theory that I've faced, that I've had this position quite a few times, including against Grandmaster Sergei Kudrin. It's actually the first time I played this, one of the first times actually I played this variation. I got to face the Grandmaster in a very critical line here. And white's best move here is actually knight to g1, at least currently the most popular move. It's a very surprising idea of just trying to trap this knight. It's a wacky looking variation, but like I said, it's a more complicated try for more complicated play here. An alternative for white that I faced once is c3, which can be simply met with c5, followed by knight c6, bishop d7, rook goes to c8. And also, white always needs to watch out for some captures on d4 with bishop b4 check. So this is a very easy to play French-type position. A slightly more challenging option is knight g3, after which c5 works just as well. The idea is to follow up with knight c6, put pressure in the center. White often plays bishop to d3 here, after which we were forced to trade. But in a position like this, we can just continue with knight c6, capture on d4, and with great pressure against white center. Again, really, the only move to worry about is knight f to g1, which really tries to embarrass our knight. So now, the best move for black here is f6, which I've played on all occasions. And this move has the idea of giving the knight an escape square while also challenging white's center. So the main line here runs f3, knight goes to g5, pawn takes f6, pawn f6, and now f4. I've also faced against the master opponent the move h4 here, but in my opinion, it's absolutely not the correct option here, since it allows us to play knight. White played f4. So actually, this is a very, very ambitious play from white. After the further c5, c3, knight c6, white was really attempting to control the whole board and really not paying any mind to the holes left by the pawns or his king safety, simply wanting to build up a huge space advantage. So it's quite an interesting try, but overall it falls quite short for white. I played bishop e7, and now after a3, I played the bishop e7. My opponent continued insanely aggressively with g4, trying to conquer the board. But after the calm pawn takes, knight a5, I was able to win a very nice game that I will be attaching. Of course, the point here is to want to exploit some of the squares that white has weakened with his pawn pushes. But maybe this bishop is coming out, rook c8, and I was able to use some nice ideas in this game to win. But again, h4 is not a move that you're likely to face, although I did face it from, as I mentioned, a master opponent. So what the main line here is, the line that I face is takes, and now f4. Now, knight e4 is a possible move here, but I'm sticking to the traditional knight f7, now knight f3. So wacky looking position here. It's getting quite heated up now with more and more Grandmaster trials here coming. And I myself have tried 3 different moves here. The first time I reached this positioning against Grandmaster Kudrin, I was actually successful with the move pawn to c5, which looks very natural, to just strike at the center and get some development going. But now I believe that it's best to keep this pawn on c6 for now in order to just control the center. I've also played the move bishop g7 on one occasion, trying to get my king to safety and play a quick e5. But now I also think this move is maybe not the best, because white is able to play a quick knight g3, knight h5, and this bishop is getting under some serious pressure. So a move here that is not very well explored is the move e5. So a very aggressive try here that I'd like to share with you and recommend. The point here is that I would like to blow open the center while this king is quite away from castling. My queen is going to be doing quite a great job at keeping the king in the center, and furthermore, my pieces are ready to jump out. My bishop going to g7, my bishop going to g4. I want to take advantage of my superior development here. So it's actually a pawn sacrifice after captures. Simply want to play bishop g7, followed by either castling or bishop g4, or even recapturing on e5. And the position that definitely needs more exploring, but it appears to me I would be perfectly happy to start with this position here, since black's play is very, very easy. All the moves are just flowing like water. All the pieces come out, and white really needs to be careful, as I mentioned, because his development and his king safety can be sorely lacking. So those are my suggestions against the 2 knights variation. Again, you have basically, like I said, 2.5 choices. If you play the Tartikower, you can keep it simple. You can take an e4. But if you're looking to spice it up, or if you're not playing the Tartikower, you can play the very solid bishop g4 with the idea of the fianchetto, or you can also play knight f6 here, which is a more aggressive option, and that leads to a very complicated position. So this depends on your style, depends again on your taste. You can have both of these in your repertoire like I do. Ultimately, the choice is up to you, and I have very strong faith in both lines and have played and tested both lines myself. So that covers the 2 knights variation here. So now we'll move on to another, namely the fantasy variation, which I'm not sure how it actually got its name, but I've always heard of it and learned of it as having this name. And again, as I mentioned in the intro, this is classified by white playing f3 in this position. This looks a little bit bizarre, but it's a sensible idea, really, because What is just trying to maintain the strong pawn tensor. So again, I have 2 recommendations here.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. தேங்க்யூ.